Hello, my name is Thomas Jordan Sperling, and before I start today, I'd like to start off with a little story to get you guys in the right mindset and think about the right type of things that I'm going to start presenting about today. So the year is 2,355, or any other year you want in the future, and you're walking down the street. You notice two different distinct type of people. One is a regular human being with their features and their flaws that you'd see in any other human being, and then the other one is a perfect looking human being walking down, striding with confidence, and you can't really find or search out any distinct flaws with them. But this is common to you because you live in an era where cyborg technology is used and is commonly, everyone's okay with it. And you know that the perfect human being is the cyborg. And that's what I'll be talking about today. So our possible future about cyborg technology. I'm going to try to accomplish two things. The first one being, is this technology actually possible or practical? And second, why this will be a good thing for humanity. First off, there's three different technologies I think that need to be progressed for this technology to be possible in our future. I understand this is a very scientific idea, but these technologies are they're actual things that are happening in today's world, and I'll show that right now. The first one is downloading consciousness. This was probably one of the most science fiction type of ideas that is in this presentation, but it was something we're actually doing today. And Jordan Anafaku at Stanford University has an article called Downloading Consciousness. He also has other contributors helping him with this. And he basically goes in talking about how simulating a brain and emulating a brain are two different things. Simulating a brain and downloading a brain are two different things. It's very easy to download a brain. All you need is a storage space and a way to actually write that information onto that storage space. But if we were to use that and say a cyborg body, you would just be a ghost of your former self, because it's just all your memories and it's not really how you interact with the world, how you feel about things. There's nothing new happening, it's just all your old information. Emulating a brain is a little different. When you simulate or emulate a brain, you're actually some sort of technology is going to be needed to use, like an AI, to predict how you're going to feel and interact and think about things once something in the world actually happens. So that's where the big difference is where we're at right now. Right now, we've simulated a part of a rat's brain, and a rat's quite different than a human, but the part of the brain of the rat that we simulated and downloaded was its nocturnal column, which is the same part that most mammals all share. So it's on its way, but it still has pretty far to go. And then the second one would be a battery source. A battery source is going to have to be able to power a human being or the cyborg for what we would consider to believe a day or even longer, because most of the time we don't get the sleep we need and we stay up a little longer doing the work we need to do. The batteries industry is very competitive in the fact that it's kind of like the cell phone industry. Every year there's new innovations and new things coming out, and the technology is getting more powerful, smaller, more compact. And you're really going to need to see that for it to be able to be inside of a human-like cyborg body, because you're obviously not going to be running around with one of these things going on. This industry that I found that I think most best fits this would be the automotive industry, because right now you can see with Elon Musk and Tesla Motors, their batteries are very strong and powerful, but as they are right now, they're way too big to power a body a human would want to be able to walk around in. The battery industry and the automotive industry are both going to be moving to clean energy as fossil fuels run out, and I think that's just going to provoke more innovation and more competition and move this technology along. Like the battery industry and the automotive industry, robotics is very competitive in the sense that there's many teams all around the world trying to do the same thing and compete to have the best type of robotics. Most of them are trying to emulate life itself by using mechanical movements to simulate what would be a natural movement, like someone moving their arm or opening a door. And you can kind of see this too with Boston Dynamics, because lately they've been putting out videos of their robots working together in fluid motion, some of them running, some of them walking, some of them doing backflips off of boxes. The latest video that they put out, it had two robots working together. One couldn't open a door, one came by, and it might have been a little theatrical because it was like kind of shocked that the other one couldn't open the door and just opens it for them. It's kind of a little scary too, but at the same time it shows where the robotics industry is moving to. It shows that they want to be able to have autonomous robots that can emulate everyday natural movements, and that may later lead on to people or robots actually emulating humans. And those would be the bodies that we might one day actually be able to inhabit. Now, I believe to show that this is a good thing for humanity, that cyborg is a good thing for humanity, it's better to reflect on the bad side. But before I do that, I'm going to show just a couple ideas that the good side could help with. And the first one I thought was kind of funny was integration with technology, because you're literally in technology. You're totally integrated with it. But I was thinking more about how you interact with the world around you. And in the sense that this world is moving to like a smart world. You have smart homes, smart cars, smart phones. And the way we interact with this technology is always becoming more and more like personalized to us. So I believe if like we're in one of these bodies, we'd be able to access the internet right away. We wouldn't need a cell phone anymore. You'd be able to communicate with anyone in the world. Say you have a security camera set up at home, you could just access that through your mind through Wi-Fi or internet. And if you're driving a motor vehicle, if they still use motor vehicles at this time, you could just interact with the car in a way that if there's any problems, it could just tell you right away, and you could almost sense it like a feeling, like a seventh sense almost. The next one will be exploration, and Leslie Mullen has an article called A Cyborg Space Race, and she basically just talks about how once we go into these cyborg bodies, we're gonna get rid of a lot of limitations that the human body has. We'll no longer need to breathe, eat, or basically the only thing we need to do is take in a power source. So exploration into space, or even around places on our Earth that we haven't been able to go to yet, would be much easier because we just don't need to take those resources with us. Also, with exploring space, the time it would take to get from point A to point B doesn't really matter anymore, because traveling space will take a lot of time. But when you take away the fact that you might not die ever, it's going to be not really a factor anymore. You can also pretty much cut out sickness and disease, because robots don't get sick and they don't have diseases. They have malfunctioning parts, you just replace them. The only disease I could see happening with this would be diseases of your brain that transferred over when you made the switch. But other than that, you could just replace parts if they get broken. So there's no real sickness or disease anymore. And there's less reason for human conflict, because I mentioned before, there's a lot less need for resources, which is something humans usually fought over, was resources and land. And if we're expanding where we can live through exploration, then there's no reason to fight over land and resources. There's no reason at all, because we don't really need them that much anymore. Now, for me to be able to prove that this is a good thing for humanity, I think it's better to reflect on some of these type points, just because the bad has to not outweigh the good for this to be a good thing. And the first one would be mortality. And Olga Kazan of The Atlantic kind of explains mortality like a party, because a party has an end in the beginning, and that's why a party's fun. So when there's no end to life, there's two possibilities I see happening with human beings. A, they go out and do everything in the world, and they experience everything they want to do, but then they have no real meaning, and they come back and they just become like a lifeless husk of a human being living inside of the cyborg, just walking around doing daily tasks, not really caring about anything. And the second one is you don't go out and do anything at all, you just kind of procrastinate your entire life away, and again you become this lifeless husk where nothing happens. And honestly, I think it depends. This could be a problem for humanity, but I also could see it not being a problem, because I see that if someone in the future lives this great long life, that more than likely they're going to be able to have the option to self-terminate at some point in time. If like they live like 2,000 years, and somebody like, yeah, you've lived a long life, it's probably time for you to get on out of here if you want to. So I can see mortality becoming a problem, but I also can see the solution to it. And societal changes is the second problem. How we interact with the world is going to drastically change, just because we're not going to be eating anymore, we're not going to be learning anymore, because we're just software pretty much in our head. And any information that we need to, it could be downloaded. Any energy we need could just take it in through a power source of some sort. So how we interact with the world is going to change. Think about it this way: if you're no longer eating, you're not going to have memories of eating around the dinner table with your family. Or if you're no longer needing to learn, you're not going to go to school and make those connections early on that build a person to who they really are. And kind of the same with hobbies and interests. Think about playing a sport. If everyone's in these mechanical bodies and it's whoever has the best parts wins, there's really no reason to play it. And also, if it's on the flip side, if everyone's just exactly the same, because the software is just whoever makes the person the best player, and everyone has the software, then there's also no reason to play, because you play to see who's the best. Also, with like reading books and playing instruments, if you wanted information of a book, you just download it, and there'd be no point of reading. And if you want to learn how to play a flute or something, you just download that information, and you automatically know how to play that. It just really takes the time and problem and like the takes the time out of actually learning to do things out of it, and it just makes it kind of pointless. One of the biggest problems I see for downline consciousness, and this is more like a personal one, person to person, how you feel about it, it's more than likely this is going to be a copy of yourself moving on, because right now the way the technology is going, you actually have to copy a brain for you to be able to transfer over, and to copy a brain means there's the original copy and a second copy, and once this process is over, you can theoretically be in the same room with yourself, talking to yourself. So it depends on whether or not you feel bad about this, but you're more than likely going to die and this person is going to live on. Personally, I don't think it's that bad because it's almost like preservation of self, that this person still gets to live on, experience life. And the Buddhist doctrine of anatta, which anatta stands for self, kind of explains identity as a process. It explains that your identity was different 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 seconds ago than you are now. And as long as you're constantly like progressing and changing and evolving with the world, then yourself is still being preserved and moving on. So I think through that kind of thought process and what I said about preservation of self, that this would be that problem, big problem for me, but it would be for everyone to determine for themselves. And then lastly, the biggest problem, one of the bigger problems that I see would be the race between and the poor, because early on this technology is going to be very expensive. And you can already see kind of like inequalities in life between rich and poor, and David Ansel, who wrote The Death Gap, really like explains that, just because in his book, The Death Gap, it shows basically where you live and where you're born and raised can determine how long you live based off the opportunities you get. And obviously some people, he focuses on like like Chicago and the type of people who live there and how their lives go between, or compared to like people in richer places. And he really just explains like how not having money, not having the proper opportunities can actually determine like you could live a lot, like 10 years long, 10 years shorter than more richer people. And this would be true to this too, because rich people would have first dibs on this type of technology, just because it's going to be extremely expensive, like I said, when it first comes out. And this isn't just a problem that stops there, because every year this technology is going to get revamped and improved, and the rich is just going to have more opportunities to get that than the poor are. In conclusion, there are a couple problems with this technology, but I think as long as humanity adapts with it and changes with the technology, it'll be for the good. And I honestly see that just because we understand our own mortality. I don't think anyone actually wants to live forever. So once people understand that and they decide that, you know, I've lived a long life and it's time to give it up, I've done everything I could, then honestly a lot of those problems probably go away. But I also open this up for you guys to decide for yourself to think if it's good or bad.